There's a Rishima called the Shimas HaMaiser, which the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote when he was in jail. He wrote about his imprisonment. In the Rishimas HaMaiser, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes about his musings, about things that he was thinking about. And some of them are recollections. He sitting in jail, he thought about things that happened to him many years earlier, and he writes them down. And one of them is what we call Masa Yalta. Masa Yalta, that the Frierdiker Rebbe as a child had a very hard childhood. The Frierdiker Rebbe's childhood was very difficult. His father was away a lot. And his father was also quite ill. And his father told him on one occasion, out of his good Lenin, if you'll learn well, maybe I'll take you along with me on my next trip. And you have to understand, when the Rebbe Rashab traveled, the Rebbetzin traveled. The Rebbe Rashab always traveled with the Rebbetzin Shtenesara, Alamo. So the Rebbe Rayatz was a boy of 4, 5, 6 years old. He was left with his grandmother. She pushed to raise him. Anyway, so they made this trip to Yalta. It's a whole Arichas Asiput. There's a lot of details to the story. But while they were traveling, I forgot if they were going or coming, they stopped in Kharkiv. I think it was like Baimer. Kharkiv was a Chassidish city with a lot of Chassidish people. And the Rebbe Rashab had a Fabrengen. The Rebbe Rashab was very young. He was 25, 26. There were people sitting at that Fabrengen 3 times his age, but he was Rebbe, you know. The Frierdiker was a little boy, and he's in the other room. And his mother is crying. So he says to his mother, Mama, was weinst du? Why are you crying? So she says to him, Du bist noch a Kind. Du bist noch young, you're a child, you're young. You can't understand. Anyway, the Frierdiker walked into the Fabrengen, and the Chassidim carried him over their heads. They brought him next to the Rebbe Rashab. And one of the Chassidim gave the Rebbe Rayatz a little mashke to say L'chaim. This is why I'm telling this story, because I'm eating crackers. So the Frierdiker was holding the mashke, and he was eyeing the cake. The Frierdiker said he learned that before you make a shahakal, you have to make a mezenis. So he didn't want to say, he was holding the mashke and say L'chaim, but he was like, but he didn't want to ask for the cakes, the psish gepast. So someone, maybe the Rebbe himself, understood that he needs a piece of cake, so he gave him a piece of cake. First he made the mezenis, and then he made the shahakal. That's what you're supposed to do. You first make a mezenis, then you make a shahakal. That's why I'm telling the story. But the end of the story is, he went over to his mother, he went over to his father, and he said to his father, Tate, the mama is in the under Zimmer und weint. But the Rebbetzin is sitting in the other room and she's crying. And the reason she was crying is because she knew how ill he was, and she knew how dangerous it was for him. Unterstrengen sich also. So he told the Frierdiker Rebbe, Gezog, the mama, as ich feel sich besser, and the Kopfetig is weg. Don't tell me, I'm feeling okay, she shouldn't worry. Anyway, I told the story because you have to eat first crackers and then you make a shakal nibadvari. Of course, the exception is Kiddush. It's a Fabrengen for the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's father. This year is how many years? It's 81 years. Last year was 80 years since the Rebbe Leivik's father passed away. Tafshin Dalet Hadash. And this is one of those stories, weißt doch, wie man kann sagen, als solche Sachen, this is, weißt doch, Mone ben Pras in Kedusha, you know. Kan ha'ov mischabet bebnoi. The connection that we have to Rebbe Leivik is because of the Rebbe. And this Fabrengen, which is very important to the Rebbe, the kibbud of aim that the Rebbe has, and the hakaras hatov that the Rebbe showed to anybody who did anything for his parents, both during their physical lifetime and even after their stalkus, was not measurable. The Rebbe had such a hakaras hatov. For him it was personal. It was personal. There are many examples of this. There was a Yid who lived not far from here. I'm assuming he davened here, but it's before my time. Rabbi Yosef Nimaitin lived on Brooklyn and Empire. I know because before I went to Almaty, I went to visit him. I was hoping that he'll help us find. Went with Bet Elazar. We went to Russia together. We were hoping he'll help us find Reb Leivik's Tzion. So he gave us all kinds of maps and diagrams on Nechtiketog. He had left Russia almost 20 years before. He gave us this diagram. And it took us a whole day. We found the Tzion by mistake. The Leivik, then he was in the middle of a forest. Now they made the whole oil, I don't know. There's a Sigavorenplatz, you know what I'm saying? Sigavorenplatz. It's nicht Gewenka Platz. But Rabbi Yosef Nimaitin was a very special Yid. He has a lot of schusim. A lot of schusim. He had a mikveh in his house, that's enough. But one of his chusim was that he took care of the Rebbe's mother. He was involved in helping her get out of Russia, leaving Almaty, which was a very big deal. And then he lived by the Rebbe. He lived in Almaty. He looked after the Rebbe's father's tzin for many, many, many years. So the shmua is, I didn't hear it directly from him, but the shmua is that the Rebbe once said to him that he has a debt of akaras hatev. He has a debt of a gratitude for how he treated his parents. And he said, I intend on paying my debt, and I intend to never finish the payment. And I read someplace, I think, that the Rebbe used to send him money for Yom Tov. The Rebbe sent him money b'gashmias. The Rebbe had an incredible akaras hatev for anybody who did anything for his parents. Chof Av and Vav Tishrei were personal days by the Rebbe that he shared with Chassidim. I heard that the first person who carries the name Levi Yitzchak carries the name of the Rebbe's father. So as a child, I'm sorry? This is better. That the first person who carries the Rebbe's father's name, the Rebbe's Chana, the Rebbe's mother had a special relationship with him, and that the Rebbe also, when he came here as a bocher, the Rebbe treated him differently, very differently, because of the fact that he carried. But they said yes, nobody knows for sure. But the rumor is that it was because he carried the Rebbe's father's name. The Rebbe had a different yachas with him. The Rebbe was very personal. Chof Av, Vav Tisha, very personal for the Rebbe's parents.
Who was the first one?
I don't know. The Rebbe gave him a very hard time. The Rebbe gave a month for them. It's like a month for them. He carried the Rebbe's father's name. The kiruv didn't express itself with aglet. It was a different kind of kiruv. There was a month for them. You carry my father's name. I said this helped me. I wasn't around. And then, of course, the Maisa with the Ksovim. That the Rebbe's Chana carried the Rebbe's Ksovim, the Rebbe's father, the Leivik's Ksovim. And you know, it's interesting how different people tell you the same story, different stories, and they stimmen nicht. And it's everyone is telling you the truth. But das ken nicht dein Name, das ken, they can't both be true. So, from what I understand, the correct version of the story is that when the Rebbe's mother left Russia, she did not take the Rebbe's father's ksavim with her. She left them in Russia. And they were gotten out of Russia because of Eretz Yisrael. They had diplomatic relations with Russia at that time. And they were smuggled into the embassy and they brought to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe had to get from Eretz Yisrael to America, which was another parasha. But the ksavim arrived probably 10 years after the beginning of the Rebbe's Nesias. You could see the Maimorim, that the Rebbe is saying Verte from his father, from the early Chofs. And in the late Chofs, the early Lameds, the Rebbe started to print his father's Chassidus, father's Torah. First the Tanya, and then the Zoyar, and then the other Sfarim, and the Igris. And there's a very unusual thing about the Ksavim of Reb Leivik. And that is that when the Rebbe printed Sfarim in the very beginning, with the B'chai Friedrich and Rebbe, and even the first years after, the Rebbe would sign his own name. When a Sefer came out from Kahos, so there was a title page, a Mavoi, what the Kuntis enclosed, and the Rebbe would sign his own name, because the Rebbe took a Cherayis. By Tafshin Tezvav approximately, maybe even before, that changes. The Rebbe doesn't sign his own name, it says Marechas Eitzer Achsidim. And the Havona in Das Tachton is because the Rebbe didn't look over every line. He wasn't taking full achrayus, so he didn't sign his name. But on the ksavim of his father, he always signed his own name. In Nun Aleph, somewhere they found another ksav yad of a reshima from the Rebbe's father on Shas, and it always started the same way. Toida LaHashem, Tov Lamed, Higia li zechus gedei lev nifla, kis v'yad, amur zal, whatever this, the Rebbe's title, addressing his father, changed over the years. In the later years, the Rebbe wrote about his father, Kved Kedushas. In the early years, he didn't. Kis v'yad amur, and the Rebbe published, and the Rebbe signed his own name. Any sefer or kuntris that came out from the Rebbe's father, the Rebbe took personal achrayus. It was a personal thing to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, of course, as soon as he started to publish the ksavim, he started saying his father's biyurim and his father's tanya. Bikin Yigeres HaTshuva. I think the Rebbe spoke in every single Haggadah from Reb Leivik and Yigeres HaTshuva. And when he finished with Tanya, he started teaching Zohar every single Shabbos for about 20 years. After the Maimed, there was a Rashi Sikh, and then there was a Zohar. The Rebbe would quote his father, and he would explain his he would always say the same thing, that his father had no paper and his father had no ink. So he wrote very, very briefly, very bekitzer, and he relied on us that we'll be able to decipher what he means, especially in the aspect of the Hira and Avodas Hashem. So very often, at least in my years in yeshiva, the Rebbe would quote from the Leivik, and he would say, what's the Hira and Avodah? And the Rebbe would explain every single Shabbos a shtickle from the Kutel of Yitzchak, his father on Zayar. From a good source. Okay, you're going to ask me names, I'll tell you privately. But I have, it's a emes and meise. Ich habe es gehört, dritte Hand. Okay, I heard it from someone, heard it from the Balamaisa. The beginning of the story is Reb Simcha Gorodetsky. Reb Simcha Gorodetsky, Olav Shalom. He was a big chassid, he was a Bal Mesiris Nefesh, a big Bal Mesiris Nefesh. Reb Simcha Gorodetsky was in the Rebbe's parents' home in the Tzadiks in the 1930s. And the Rebbe was out of the country already. And the mail came. Reb Leivik looked through the mail, and he saw one envelope. And before he opened it, he went and he put on his kapota, and he put on his hat, and he put on his gatla, and he washed his hands. And then he opened the letter and he read it. Reb Simcha was mishtoimim. Reb Leivik was a lion. Besides for his greatness, he was a great man. So he says to Reb Simcha, for whom do you have to wash your hands and put on a gatla and a kapota? So he said, a brief from Zun, I got a letter from my son. So Reb Simcha Gorodetsky says, for your son, you have to get dressed up like this. So Reb Simcha Gorodetsky, the Leivik said to him, he passed me a long time ago. He passed me a long time. The Rebbe's mother also said that the Leivik said that. So for us, the schus is that we make a fabringen and chaf of because of our connection to the Rebbe. I don't know if you're aware. There's a sikha from the Rebbe from Tafshin Yud Aleph, Tes Kislev. The sikha is printed. Tes Kislev, before the official Kabbalah and the Siyas, where the Rebbe asked a question, that why are we making a fabringen on Tes Kislev? What kind of connection do we have to the Mittler Rebbe? We have only one Rebbe. And the Rebbe answered, because all the Rebbeim are included in the Rebbe. And when we mark a day connected to another Rebbe, it's because of how that Rebbe is included in the Rebbe. So I think it's reasonable to say that we're fabringing chaf of because of the connection to the Rebbe. That's what everything is. Everything is about the Rebbe. It's all about our relationship with the Rebbe, the connection to the Rebbe. The Rebbe's tate, the Rebbe's father. Just a few stories, a few little things. Of course, all of us know that Reb Leivik was a Moirin Dike Meyuchas. Reb Leivik was the grandson from the Tzemach Tzedek. When the Rebbe printed his father's ksavim, he used the Tzemach Tzedek sharblat. You know that, right? When the Rebbe printed his Sfarim, when the Rebbe printed the Hayem Yem and the Haggadah I think it was, So by that point, the Frierdiker had already established what's called Marechas Eitzarach Sidim, and every Rebbe had a different Hechel, right? The Baal Shem Tov's Hechel Rishon, the Magid Hechel Sheni, the Rebbe's Hechel Shlishi, the Rebbe Rayatz's Hechel Shmini, and they had a different Sharblettel. The margin of the pages is, each Rebbe is different. So when the Rebbe came to the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was making the Agod in Tavshin Vav, and he asked him what margin he should use, Azay zokt I wasn't there. But Azay did tell Chassidim that the Frierdiker Rebbe said to the Rebbe, to our Rebbe, the Tate is der Gewen Apnimi. The Tate Gewen Apnimi. Du bist doch Apnimi. Nade dem Tatens Shar. At the Rebbe Rayas gave the Rebbe, our Rebbe, to use the same Sharblat, the same margin as the Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab. You could see it. You don't have to believe me. You could see it. When the Rebbe printed his father's Ksovim, he used the Tzemach Tzedek's Sharblettel. I mean, in Das Tachen, because it was an amical. In Das Elyon, I don't know, but this is the Metzias. Rebbe Leivik was a descendant from the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, from the Baruch Shalom, from the Ravash. And everybody knows the story. These are printed in Likutei Levi Yitzchak. He told us Levi Yitzchak that the Ravash was the oldest. The Rebbe's grandfather's grandfather was the Baruch Shalom. The Baruch Shalom, right? The Ravash, Shalom. He was the oldest of the Tzemach Tzedek's children. He knew the Alter Rebbe yet. He knew the Alter Rebbe. He was connected to the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe was Bechanechim. He was involved with the Alter Rebbe. He was his great-grandfather, the Alter Rebbe was, the Ravash. And the Tzemach Tzedek, the story is that the Tzemach Tzedek said to him that Du bist doch the B'chor, you're the oldest, and according to Halacha, you have a right to the succession, to the Nesias. And he said to him, you should not accept the Nesias, don't accept it. And he told him, if you're not going to take the Nesias, so you'll have Pishnayim Beruchi. A Bechor gets Pishnayim. A firstborn gets twice the inheritance of all the others. If you won't become a Rebbe, you get Pishnayim. And then he told him, V'dei Revi Yeshivuheina. They'll come back to you in 4 generations. So the family knew that the Tzemach Tzedek had predicted that from the Ravash's kinder, V'dei Rebbe, noch 4 Deiros, V'dei Revi Yeshivuheina. So the Lashon Hara goes that when the Rebbe married the Rebbetzin, Rebbe Leivik obviously was very proud. Rebbe Leivik was very proud of the Rebbe. Very proud of the Rebbe. There's a letter from Rebbe Leivik to the Rebbe, which was written after the Sheva Brachas. I don't know how soon after. I don't know if Rebbe Leivik had other sources of information other than the Rebbe. But when the Rebbe described to his father his wedding, he probably did not make much of a tzimis out of himself. So the Leivik heard one comment that the Frierdiker Rebbe said by the Chassanah. The Frierdiker made a number of extraordinary comments about the Rebbe. One of them is, he said, by the Chassanah, the Frierdiker Rebbe said loud, as biti nasati leish. But there were other expressions as well that the Frierdiker Rebbe expressed by the Chassanah about the Rebbe. So Rebbe Leivik is writing to the Rebbe and says, I want to know every nice thing the Frierdiker Rebbe said about you. I need to know. I know you have a lot situation with Anivis, but this is about me. Ich bin a Tate und ich habe ein Recht zu wissen. I'm a father and I have a right to know. So the Lashon Hara is that the Rebbe would tell Chassidim that he's the Mechutin of the Frierdiker Rebbe and he's the father of the next Rebbe. The first part was very good. The second part was really very bad. Because Bachsidim Retozah, you know, but Rebbe Leivik hat sich stolziert mit den Rebben. The Rebbe Leivik was very proud. So L'chaim V'Levracha, we're bringing this day, and this connects us to the Rebbe. So I should bless us all. There should be 40 days before Rosh Hashanah. Hebt sich schon an zugegeben sich auf Rosh Hashanah. There's many siches where the Rebbe connects today for a variety of different reasons with Mem Daled Yom im Chab Chamish Osa. Weißt du, Mem Daled Yom 2 Wochen mit 30 Tag. Is Hashanah stimmt mit Chamisha Oser, mit the Polish Wort. No, it's Azei Chaptas, right? Especially El has 29 days. So Mem Daled Yomim Chapt Chamisha Oser B'Yav. So you have a Makar Nigle for a Polish Wort. Okay, L'chaim V'Levrach, L'chaim al Yiddische Kinder, L'chaim V'Levrach, L'chaim V'Levrach. Tere yada da 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 yada da 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 ya yada yada da 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 yada da 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 tere yada da 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 yada da 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 ya yada yada da yada da 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 yada da 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 ya yada la la da 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 ay la da 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 ay la da 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 yada yada da da yada yada da da la da 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 the gabe shviyes, yes. The Reisig der Schleichim Shana Vashana Choshev Shana. Wie mir rechnen Adel Marshall, yeah. Aber das sind 2 Wochen. Vater Ruf. Ja, es 44 Tage. Es ist bei dir Chamish Asviyav. Nicht das sei? Nothing. Ask your son to put it away. Give me a bracha. May I give me a bracha. You should be my Talmud for your whole life.